Okay, we'll get started now. Good morning, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the first of a few micro webinar series here. The first one is low overhead microservices operations for the modern enterprise. We're going to be providing a high level overview and a demo here shortly. My name is Eli Kapitanopoulos. I am a ServiceNow engineer at RapDev. I'm also here with Josh Van Horn, one of our solutions engineer, and Joe Steinfeld from ServiceNow as well. This is the usual ServiceNow safe harbor notice. Joe, I don't know if you want to go over anything here.
Yeah, just real quick. So again, welcome everyone. Just some of the things you're going to see may contain forward-looking statements. Just safe harbor. Don't make any purchasing decisions based on those forward-looking decisions. So.
Awesome. Housekeeping, this presentation will be recorded and sent out to all attendees that have signed up for the webinar through the registration link. And we will also have a Q&A at the end to answer any questions that are in the Q&A. So here over at RapDev, if you don't know us, we're an engineering firm focused on bridging the gap between the ServiceNow platform and cloud native services. We help customers push the boundaries on ITOM and DevOps implementations, extracting value beyond what the standard ServiceNow use cases are. Our team has a strong background in SRE and DevOps practices, and brings that to the ServiceNow platform using methods like ChatOps, service-oriented CMDBs, event-based discovery, and tag-based service mapping, a lot of what you'll see in the demo to come. So for the meeting today, we'll go over a demo presentation, then we'll have a Q&A, and we'll give you a little insight into the next webinar that's coming up shortly next month.
Okay, thanks, Josh. So just a couple of slides to set up what you're going to be seeing today and why we're showing you, why we're talking around microservices. And this is probably familiar to a lot of you, right? We've seen over the years, you're seeing circa 2000, but even going prior to that, companies were developing solutions based, monolithic solutions, right? Applications. Those are often all the functions of an application, right? Keeping track of user sessions, right? Database interactions, cart, right? History information, all those functions kept within a single application, often running on big, right? Very few number of servers, and then using a waterfall approach from a project standpoint, which we'd see, it was good, right? Everything kind of moved along together, but it was slow changing. And then as customers said, hey, we see technology as a differentiator, right? To bring more money, right? To get more revenue in the door and to provide better experiences for our customers, we started to pull apart those functions of an application into loosely coupled what's known as microservices. So an application now is spread across several components, often running on many different servers or even cloud native technologies like database as a service or containers as a good example. And that allowed customers to say, hey, I can iterate on those components of an application versus having to package everything up together and test it as an entire entity. And so they rapidly updating, right, allows them to bring smaller, innovative things to their customers to create that differentiation in the marketplace. So if you want to go to the next slide, Josh. And then we look at how those microservices, as companies started moving to that. So you look at agile project management approaches, right? DevOps, smaller teams to develop, operate on these things, giving them full autonomy to update their components. But as you can see, here in this example, we see a lot of different applications on the right, microservices on the right side, written on different languages. That's another, caveat, not caveat, but way that they're doing it. So they can use whatever language they want to. And then you have a lot of distributed, right, independent teams developing and innovating on those. So if you want to hit the animation there. So in this, as you see that happening, these teams are iterating on each one of these microservices independently, but these things have to all work, right, for a business application, customer portal, for example, to keep that up and running. Right? And then here starts to, show the problem. So we've seen several, if you want to go to the next slide here, Josh, we've seen three kind of key themes as customers start to move into this model. Right? First of all is visibility, understanding, hey, what microservices do I have? How do they all talk to each other? So you'll see the lack of connections, on this slide there. So how are they all working together to support the business? And then even at a technology level down low, how are they connected when I need to troubleshoot, things that are going on? And then you move on to the velocity side, right? As you let these teams do things, right? It's always the balance between bringing new innovative services, features to market, with speed, but making sure there's quality control. So helping you, and this is one area, right, RapDev, ServiceNow are focused on, is helping you do that balance. Let's keep the speed, but make sure quality doesn't suffer as we do so. And then on the third side, the resiliency. How do you measure when things go wrong? And inevitably they will go wrong, since these microservices are iterated on independently. It becomes very hard to find that needle in the haystack when there's performance issues, right? And heaven forbid, outage issues affecting it. So these are the three, if you look, three key themes that we see customers struggling with. We'd love to get feedback, even that during the chat, or maybe even at the end of this, to see what your experiences are as you start to move to this more microservice-based way of delivering applications and services. All right, Josh, want to go on to set up the demo?
Yep, great. So just a little overview of what you're going to be seeing in the demo here. We are going to simulate a developer deploying an update to a production service in GitHub. It will kick off a GitHub Actions pipeline, which will automatically open a change request in ServiceNow. It will meet our auto approval policy, and then we will receive an external monitoring notification that an issue has been detected. Our tag-based service map in ServiceNow will display a critical production outage. An incident will be created for this service, and the teams will be notified of the outage via chat ops in our Slack workspace. And then we will go ahead and deploy a fix for that production service and see the service be restored. Turn it over to Josh now.
Thank you, Eli. Let me start sharing. Eli, can you confirm you're seeing the ADO board?
Yes, we have your ADO board now.
Excellent. Thank you. And good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Just as we go into the demo, just to reiterate what Eli said, this is a simplified representation of what you can have in your environment. We're starting off with a microservice update due to an action here. As you can see, is a specific PPM. So I have an action here that I need to add some comments to a Docker file because that's new requirements. And we have a GitHub repo where we have, in this case for the demo, a dev branch where I'm going to update a Docker file. So we'll do some standard stuff. And as I go through this demo and we're waiting on some of these things to build, I'll briefly step out on and touch on a few of these things like the DevOps module and integration of code. But we'll just add some comments here. execution. File. And as I'm doing something, my fingers also slip. I didn't notice this. I'm going to go to my work item here. So this is item 461. Flip back for item 461. It's good developer hygiene. And I can commit this directly to my dev branch. Well, as this runs, and I can show you the pipeline we're using in this for this demo, we're using GitHub Actions. We've run this pipeline a few more times, as you can see, but you can see that currently this is being queued. We started this morning with GitHub having some action, so it might be a few delays here and there. But while we wait for this to commit, I wanted to briefly talk about the DevOps module that we're using at the back of this. So just to give you an example, so the DevOps module is a capability on the platform as part of your ITSM Pro that collects information from pipelines, from your code development activities or your commits, information about the tests that were performed, and collects that information in one place in ServiceNow that allows you to tie it to things like automated change approvals and an insight, as you can see here, dashboards on who's doing what, things like DORA metrics can be touched on. So how successful are we in driving change in the organization with the development that we're doing, and what's the deployment success, what's the lead times, etc. So let's see if that, I think it's still building. Yeah, still queued. So let's take one more minute to talk about DevOps. So in general, one of the things, the main things that allows you to do, and we'll briefly show here as well, is that when a pipeline deploys, like I just did, and then that pipeline is connected to the change management module or the DevOps change capability, allows you to submit a change, have the system use information that's available from the build, from the tests, from the organizational information, so the non-functional information, and use that information to decide whether or not the risk profile of a commit or a deployment ability is high or low, and use that information to route either to an automated approval and then tell the pipeline to execute, or wait for a manual approval, or even reject the pipeline deployment, in which case the pipeline would stop, the deployment would not happen, and you can do a post-mortem type review if needed. So while we wait, I'm just going to pull in part of the DevOps here as well, so we can see as it comes up. So we have a CI/CD group. These are things that happened earlier. So as soon as the build actually is successful, we'll see it pop up here too. And as a developer, I can then keep a track on what's going on with my change and make sure that it's going through. So we'll keep that one here for a sec. Actually see where this build is still queued. I guess that means a little more time on the DevOps. We have this one here in the corner. So what we're waiting for right now is just the pipeline on GitHub Actions to be built by GitHub. It's a pretty straightforward pipeline. I think we included one test just to get some test information on the DevOps change that gets created, and a standard build that would push to our dev environment in this case. On the background, we have an external monitoring tool that monitors that deployment. So it's a standard Docker file in our running on an EC2 instance. For those that like the technology part of it, so that that deployment with the mistake I just made in my code should lead to a failure, and then our monitoring tool would pick that up by seeing that there is a fluctuation in the number of active containers or instances assigned to the service, and then create an alert in ServiceNow. So you push the event, and ServiceNow creates the alert. And I think we're still in a holding loop. Oh, so that looks like it came through. Oh yeah, there we go. Sorry, so busy talking I didn't see it. So as you can see here, just at last minute, we've got an actual change that came through, and it was created. So we're just going to wait for the issues to show up here. So I'm obviously, as a developer, completely unaware that I made the mistake, that I messed up the code. I am part of in this case, a demo 9 incident. So that's for our instance, a message group that keeps track on anything that might escalate and that requires attention of the DevOps community, right? As common, depending on how the distribution of work is between the DevOps engineers and the SREs, we might have requirements to keep monitoring and keeping track on what our app is doing in production. And this is one way of using ServiceNow information, integrate that into whoever's watching the queue, basically directly from their ChatOps capability. So that for the monitoring to happen, that could be anywhere between 1 and 3 minutes. So let me just quickly pull up the change while we wait. And as you can see here, so we've created a specific DevOps change. It's a standard component of the DevOps module. We see that there's a scheduling conflict, but we've decided in the flow to ignore that. But you can extend those flows to include things like the relevance of conflicts or not going to an execution stage. But as you can see there's a DevOps change reference to the pipeline that we ran. And here at the bottom, I just want to touch on the fact that you can see the commit I made. This is the code change. But because I had good hygiene, you can also see that the work item that exists in ADO boards and the Azure DevOps boards also is included. So from an oversight perspective, I now actually have information from an auditing, right? So which work item led to which code update, which led to which artifact version creation, and which pipeline deploy on the back of that. And I can see to what service it belongs, and I can see if it was automatically or manually approved in this case. Eli did the honors for auto approving. Now, while I was talking, something popped up. I have it suppressed. So we see that Demo 9 actually alerts us that there is an incident with the container, and I can actually click here and see what's going on. So if I'm doing this, obviously this is how it would start. If you have an operations team, a NOC or a SOC or something that's monitoring production, or your SREs, right, that look at production stability, then they would probably start on the event management side. But here I can see event management information, the incident created, the standard relationships. But I can just want to pop from here to the alert. At the bottom here, we see that there's an alert, and this alert was created. So I'm still currently unaware what's happening. So I'm looking at the alert information, and I can see that it came in through an external monitoring source, and we can see that there's a container issue. If we wanted to, at the bottom here, so I can see that there are some historic issues because I did previous testing and clearing, but I also have a root cause reference. So the information on potential changes or changes that disrupted this event happened as well. And from there, I can click through to that exact change. So if we, from here, let's do a brief. So I've seen this as an engineer. Let me just make the update because it's a little slow, and then I'll talk a little bit about service mapping on the back of that. But so I see that there's an issue. As an engineer, like an ops engineer, I can actually see the related changes in information through root causes. So there's correlation, and it's because I've tied it to this service, the service definition. So with that knowledge, I go, what have I done? I go back and check my code. Like, what did I actually make a mistake? I go back to my Docker file, and I can see that obviously this is bad coding. So I'm going to go in. I'm going to update this. Mistake. I should really create a bug, right? But at this point, I'm too focused on fixing production, so I'm just committing it through the branch, and I'll go back and fix that up later. And this one should then run into the same build process. So we'll wait for that one to pop up in a few minutes. But the essence here is because I've created this update, now the actual code would run. I'm calling the correct container information for the execution as Docker picks this up. So the pipeline will post this file to our dev instance, and it will trigger a rebuild from there, reinitialization, and we'll be able to actually successfully deploy the container information. And because it can deploy, it should, and we can see if that's true, but we should be able to see that the alert that we created is going to be automatically closed because the trigger for it is coming back through our external monitoring as closed. And because that's closed, the incident can also be resolved. So we'll see that information. I'll keep this screen on for a sec. And while we wait for this, let me just see where this is. It's still queued. So while we wait for that to load, I just want to briefly talk about service mapping and kind of the thing that you can't really see here, but is an important element. So this RapDev bot PPM test is a tag-based application service. And on the back of this, for those that haven't really looked at service mapping or what tag-based service mapping means, the essence of a tag-based service map is that we use tags that exist in your environment or labels given to components typically that live in a cloud environment, and use those to group them and say, with these values for these keys like environment, application name, maybe user group, right? These are services, these are application services, and we want to collect anything that pops up with the same tags. So with a tag-based application service, you create that definition, and then the system will collect anything that Discovery will pick up with those matching tags, which means that there is no maintenance once you've defined it, as long as everybody has good tagging hygiene. The tagging strategy is there, and you always have the option to use things like the tag governance that runs on the ServiceNow platform to make sure that everything that is discovered actually is compliant with your internal strategy for that. So there's several components on the platform in combination with discovery and the tag checks that you can do to make sure that those things come in correct. Once they come in correct, they associate to the application map automatically. One step that you can go on beyond that is also automate that process. If you have good tag hygiene, you can actually define those application services automatically as soon as you start discovering one instance or one component within that service, and have ServiceNow automatically create that service. That requires a little bit of work, but that's typically what we do. And we've also created something that we call the now.yaml, which is the way for declaratively for your developers to define their application service directly from their code repo. So if you have that microservice, they add a reference file, the now.yaml, we sync that up using existing DevOps capabilities, and then we create the application service automatically on the back of that, which means you now have a declarative definition of the service. That information is processed by ServiceNow and automatically creates application services as they come in. So between that and the abilities to do similar things through APIs, if you have more monolithic type applications, means that you're now feeding ServiceNow with information about the application service automatically, creating relationships and an understanding of how things piece together without manual intervention. And therefore, things like this, identifying events, associating to the correct service, creating the incident on the back of that, or even tying it to things like auto remediation rules, all of that now becomes a pretty straightforward process. Just see where we are. Okay, at least it's still queued. I think GitHub is having a great day today, or at least the engineers at GitHub. So we'll wait. We'll continue waiting for that to complete. Let me just briefly check or talk about the, it's actually a great opportunity to talk about the other aspect of it. So when we talk about the alert and the correlation, so I don't know how many of you have looked at the AIOps or the generic, the capability of predictive AIOps on the ServiceNow platform. But what you'll find there is that combining data streams like we have here with external monitoring in combination with discovery, but also extending it with capabilities like health log analytics on the ServiceNow platform, allows you to create a full 360 understanding of the health of a service, but also in terms of analyzing what went wrong or how events correlate to each other or what the sequence of events were. All of that information is now available directly in ServiceNow. So by exploring and extending the capability, making sure that all your data feeds into ServiceNow event management, and having good services defined, ideally automated or partially automated, have that information available, means you're now both assisting your operations team or being able to find the right DevOps teams to ensure that anything that pops up or potentially is an impact on your production stability can be addressed either as it pops up or even before it happens, right? With health log analytics, you're able to identify anomalies to the behaviors of applications straight from the logs and use that to even analyze that there's a potential issue that might pop up soon, like a database that's not responding or slowing down, users that are switching to a certain node. So all that information, as long as your application logs have it, especially important for internal applications, that information will be used to come in. So I think we're still waiting for this pipeline to run. Yep. Maybe a pause here if there are any questions, Eli, on so far, or anybody on the call. Feel free to drop some questions on anything you've seen so far.
Don't have any questions as of yet, but Josh, can you show the service map?
Of course, yes. Let me actually try and do that from the workspace. So this is the same original alert that created the incident with the impacted service here that we can see. And I think if we go here, let's do it that way. So this is the general operator workspace. So if you have your NOCs or other operating centers or specialists monitoring production, right, they would see, in this case, they would see RapDev PPM showing up as red with the ability to click through, right? And here they can go actually to the service map. And again, this is a pretty straightforward, but you can see that it's all red and there are issues to this map. So in more complex environments, obviously you would have underlying components, but we can see here that the core of the issue is associated to this VM, and we can actually see that it's a VM instance, and we can get information about where it's running. So that's basically the setup. So from our service map, the service definition, and then the instance in EC2 that is running the container. Let's see if
Hey, Josh,
GitHub.
there is a question that came in through question and answer, and maybe I thought since we're waiting here, you
Sure.
might be able to answer it. So, we showed how through DevOps change, right, we can connect to a deployment pipeline, right? So you can adhere deployments to a customer's change process and use change automation to make sure you're executing with velocity while bringing quality. But what about, can you talk on bidirectional updates to stories in ADO from ServiceNow? Is that possible, right? Or to other, DevOps tooling? Does that make sense?
Yeah, so let's explore that. There's a few directions we can take that, but the first one, the syncing of stories, external stories to, for instance, ServiceNow, Agile Development 2, version 2, is fairly common as a central repository to monitor the work across different tool sets. The DevOps module itself syncs this information, but doesn't necessarily push back. So it's primarily designed to be a repository for that data in a normalized fashion from Jira, from ADO, etc. But you would have the option, because you see that end-to-end chain, to say once a change is successfully executed to production, then go back and update all the work items. So post back to Jira in this case and say that the deployment was successful, and maybe a reference to the deployment, and then close the task. Or maybe do a validation on the status of the task and then close it. So those are not uncommon scenarios. It kind of depends on the level of automation and standardization that you have in your pipelines.
Okay. No, thank you. And then I guess the only kind of following on from that, right, based on like issues, right? And we showed in the demo you did, right, how an issue was raised due to some bad coding, right? Raising bugs within a Jira, right? Whatever your planning tool is that a possibility also? And it sounds like based on your previous answer, it is, but.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, and again, to reiterate, right, we can, a lot of this data, because it comes in out of already from the DevOps module, we can understand a lot more about an application. As you saw, the track between the alert, and then the related incident to the change that is most likely or most recent deployment to the tasks that belong to it or the commits. Right? You could even tie it to an auto rollback if you wanted to on the last change. Right? So those capabilities exist. The other part of that automation is like Jira bugs, right? You could, one of the things we typically do if we implement chat ops is that because people collaborate on the chat, let me just pull that up a little bit. So on the chat, this one doesn't have it, but on the chat, I could actually create, while we collaborate on this incident, I can create tasks, problem tasks that would then also sync to Jira or create a task directly in Jira for the right team based on the application that is associated to the incident. So those are things where ideally we want the developers to work in the tool set of their choice. So if that's Jira, then let's make sure that they stay in Jira in combination with things like Slack, because that's really the world, right? The code, their IDE plus Jira and Slack. Post that back to Jira so they can work on that ticket asynchronously. So once the issue is done, or if you want bugs directly, you can have each incident based on the stories or the project that's associated to the last update, post back with bugs there as well and create the association. So there's a lot you can do simply by the fact that we're collecting all that information, associating it to the change, and that information can now be used by things like event management to do backtracking.
And then a question from Kevin came in also, and I'll just let you answer it, Josh, since you're here. Does this also apply to ADO? So again, different deployment methodology. So, and I think the answer is yes, but I'll let you elaborate. So.
Yeah, it definitely is, yes. So I think the beauty of the model, both on the DevOps side and the way we integrate back into the other tool sets, is that for DevOps, it's very tool agnostic, right? Or actually completely tool agnostic. The way we collect data is obviously tied to the system of record in this case, like Jira or ADO boards or ADO pipelines or your Jenkins, right? It doesn't matter what tool set you use. We're collecting the data, normalizing it. Because we are normalizing it, we also have a reference to that original system, which means we always know where it came from, and we therefore can also decide how to post it back. On top of that, the task integrations, like ServiceNow comes with a pretty extensive integration hub spoke capability that integrates with a lot of tool sets that are used for planning, like Jira, like ADO, which can be leveraged to create that post-back function specifically to how your organization works. And the last part of that is, even if you use a less common tool set, the integration hub capability allows us to even through SOAP, if it's an old system, but REST APIs and other ways of integrating with that external system by creating a custom spoke that is for that application specific.
Yeah, thank you, Josh. That's great. So any other questions? Josh looks like GitHub's got a little slow today in processing that.
GitHub is not liking it today for sure. No.
So any other questions while we're waiting? We have till top of the hour. Not sure we'll go that far. We do want to give you insight into where we're taking this here in a minute, but before we do that, want to make sure this resonates with the audience here. If you had any questions of what's been shown or what we've talked about up to this point. And feel free to post questions in the chat or even in the question answer also.
Great. So we'll wait for a few more questions to come in, but while you guys are writing your questions here, we'll chat a little bit about what's coming next in our webinar that's coming up on the 21st. We're going to be implementing HLA and AI Ops. HLA is Health Log Analytics, which Josh spoke of a little bit in his demo, and also including Lightstep as our alert source on creating these alerts for these production services and digging into the tag-based service correlation.
And while we continue to wait, I think there was I saw a question, look at the Q&A. So a question about pre-prod. I think, Joe, you already grabbed that.
Yeah, yep. I think we're good on that one. Unless there was any other questions about the answer there, but I think we've hit all the questions at this point.
Excellent. And then while we wait, just an endorsement for this for the next webinar. Just in general, if you haven't looked at HLA as a key component into understanding what's happening in your environment, just to call out here, it's definitely one of the cooler feature extensions from a application management and observability perspective, like understanding what's going on, especially HLA. Personally, the coolest feature, the ability to, without a predefined pattern, identify changes in pattern behavior. So if you have a chance, definitely tune in for that one. Hopefully GitHub will not give us issues on that day, because this is definitely the longest I've ever waited on a thing to process. So it's not going anywhere. And if we don't reach it in a few minutes, then I'll just briefly talk you through the process, so we don't have to wait on it actually seeing. Maybe get some history file, but actually I'm going to talk through it now. So when this pipeline runs, it's going to fix the original issue. Right? The container is going to come back up. Our external monitoring identifies that that the original issue is no longer applicable. It will send that information, like the resolve, back into ServiceNow Event Management. Event Management will then update the alert and will also close the associated incident ticket, or resolve the associated incident ticket. At that point, everything's back to normal, back to green, and we continue our regular show. So the on the background there, if it would happen again or something else in the related sphere would happen, your event management correlation allows you to associate it to that existing alert if there are enough similarities between the thing that occurred, and it will reopen the alert and create a new change record for the team to work on. So that's kind of the process, how it works end to end, and how it's a continuous cycle of data and of monitoring data and service information running through ServiceNow and responding to changes in the actual environments.
Okay, there was one last question, Josh, and I'll answer, and I'll let you elaborate as necessary. So it came in from Kevin too. So he was asking, is the tag the mechanism that allows the incident and the build to be connected and related? It's actually the infrastructure that they're bound to. So the application, the microservice itself, that's allowing those two to connect. But I don't know if you want to elaborate on that, Josh.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think there's a few more things to touch on there. So in general, the tags belong to infrastructure. That's what Joe already mentioned. There are also tags that can exist in your monitoring. So as things pop up, there is metadata that your monitoring system might contain, association from infrastructure service, those kinds of tags, and that information is also coming into event management. So you can use those to identify relationships. The tag base I initially talked about when we talk about service mapping is tags that exist in the infrastructure that get discovered associated to an application service based on that tagging, so a tag-based application service. And because that service and that infrastructure are now related, any event coming in against infrastructure with those tags will automatically be associated to that service. So there's That's one way. That's a traditional where, for instance, if your system monitoring or your infrastructure monitoring isn't necessarily tied to anything like a service, you don't, your monitoring tool doesn't have it, or not everything's yet under control of your new monitoring tools. There's still some old stuff out there that you use OMI or NNM, NNMI for, right? So other monitoring tools that are more legacy. That information coming into ServiceNow based on the CI it's associated to would still wrap into that application service, because we know that that infrastructure is tied to that service based on the tagging information. That's obviously not limited to tag-based application services. If you have entry point or ML-based, machine learning-based services, then the same process will happen. So event management ingests those service maps and uses that to create correlations and relationships. I think there's another pop-up there. Kevin, let me just read that through. Yeah. So the short of it is to Kevin, I'll just read the question. So the question is if the AI component for application mapping and the AI in AI ops is the same technology. The very short of it is yes. There's one AI engine that helps drive ServiceNow and its capabilities, but they do address different things, right? The type of data they consume is different. Your discovery AI, and I'm assuming that's probably machine learning based service maps, is more focused on discovering devices and looking at communication patterns between devices to identify which relationship is most likely to define the actual connectivity that is relevant for the service you're trying to map, and then add those things to a service map or suggest to be added. And then you can set policies to automatically add them or to manually review the suggestions and then have them added to the service map.
Yeah, correct, Josh. Yeah, there's different algorithms
Sadly
under the
not
covers
going to see coming up with that. Not going to see the actual fix go into production, but I'll hand it back over to Eli for some closing words.
I think we're coming up near the end, so thanks. So Eli, I'll turn it over to you.
Really. Thanks, Josh and Joe. If you have any more questions, please follow up via email or reach out to one of us, and we'll be able to get you those questions answered. And you'll be receiving a recording of this webinar in the next coming days. Thank you guys for attending, and we hope to see you on our next one.